My thumb slipped. A text meant for my buddy Dave, a casual invite to blow off some steam, went to the one person it absolutely, under no circumstances, should have. Victoria Sterling, the Ice Queen, my boss. I was staring at my monitor on the ninth revision of a design that was slowly sucking the life out of me when my phone buzzed. Without looking, I tapped out the text to Dave. Need to blow off some steam. You in? I added a winking emoji for good measure. Sent. Done. I dropped the phone and stretched, my spine cracking like a string of firecrackers. Time to dive back into the client's latest impossible demands. My phone buzzed again. That was fast. Did Dave get fired or something? I picked it up, my eyes scanning the screen, and then my blood ran cold. Wrong contact. The suggestive late-night text wasn't sitting in my chat with Dave. It was sitting, stark and horrifying, under the name Victoria Sterling, my company's founder and CEO, a woman rumored to have glaciers for vocal cords. And below my catastrophic mistake was a single, terrifying notification. Read. A cold sweat slicked my back. It felt like my heart had stopped. I was so fired. My name is Jack Carter. I'm a designer, which is a nice way of saying I spend 10 hours a day moving pixels around to satisfy the whims of people with more money than taste. Victoria Sterling is a legend, a phantom who glides through the office and can freeze an entire boardroom with a single look. And I had just propositioned her. I could already see my future, fired, blacklisted from the industry, living out of a shopping cart. My finger, trembling, jabbed at the message bubble. Delete. Unsend. Recall. But the golden 2-minute window was long gone. The option to unsend was grayed out, as bleak and final as my career prospects. Just as I started composing a frantic 800-word apology that was part groveling and part last will and testament, the 3 little dots appeared at the bottom of the screen. She was typing. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was it going to be, "You're fired," or just a simple, soul-crushing "get out"? A few seconds later, a new message popped up. Instant reply. Send me your location. I just stared at it. I closed the app and opened it again. Checked the profile picture. It was her, the same professionally shot, impossibly perfect headshot from the company website. My location? What for? Did she want to fire me in person for maximum humiliation? Was this some new, sadistic HR policy? My brain was a blue screen of death. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, paralyzed. This had to be some kind of power play. Confuse the enemy, instill terror, then drop the axe. The woman was brutal. While my mind raced, trying to choose between sending my address or the address of the nearest funeral home, my doorbell rang. Sharp, insistent, the kind of ring that doesn't take no for an answer. I live in an old building with paper-thin walls. Who the hell was here at this hour? I crept to the door and peered through the peephole. The motion sensor light in the hallway flickered on, illuminating a tall, solitary figure. A tailored black business dress, sharp and severe. Dark hair pulled back in a tight, elegant bun, revealing a long, graceful neck. And that face, flawless, beautiful, and currently set in an expression of Arctic indifference. Her eyes could have cut glass. It was Victoria Sterling. How did she get here? How did she even know where I lived? Then, a detail sent a fresh wave of terror through me. In a hand that wasn't holding a sleek, $1,000 handbag, she was carrying a massive, heavy-looking white garment bag. The kind you get from a high-end bridal boutique. My brain completely shut down. What was she doing? Firing me with a wedding dress? Was this some kind of bizarre corporate ritual I'd missed in the employee handbook? The doorbell rang again, louder this time, like a summons from the grim Reaper himself. Taking a deep breath, and with the grim acceptance of a man walking to the gallows, I opened the door. Victoria's cold eyes locked onto mine, sweeping over my rumpled t-shirt and faded board shorts. There was no disgust in her expression, just a detached, clinical assessment. Then, she held up the garment bag. With the coldest face I had ever seen, she spoke the most insane words I had ever heard. Jack Carter. Why, yes, Ms. Sterling. I stammered. You want it in? Her voice was quiet, but it hit me like a thunderclap. I nearly dropped to my knees right there in the doorway. No, Ms. Sterling, that was a mistake. A typo. I sent it to the wrong person. I meant to. She cut me off, completely uninterested in my panicked explanation. We get married first. Then you get in. And with that, She shoved the enormous wedding dress bag into my arms, clicked past my stunned, motionless body on 10-centimeter heels, and strode into my disaster zone of a living room. The garment bag was heavy, smelling faintly of expensive fabric and crushing the last of my sanity. I stood frozen in the doorway, clutching it as Victoria's gaze swept over the landscape of my bachelorhood. The leaning tower of takeout containers on the coffee table, the dirty laundry heaped on the sofa, the dust-gathering design models in the corner. Her brow furrowed for a fraction of a second before her face settled back into its default icy mask. She turned, her eyes landing on me again, not like a boss looking at an employee, but like a scientist studying a lab rat. "Ms. Sterling," I finally managed to say, my voice raspy. What? What does this mean?" "It means exactly what I said." She walked toward me, the added height of her heels forcing me to look up at her. "You will marry me. The contract will be for 1 year. At the end of the year, we get a quiet divorce. No strings attached." My brain felt like it was full of bees. I couldn't process the information. Marry me? Her? The multi-millionaire, untouchable CEO of my company? All because I fat-fingered a text message? This wasn't just a lucky break. This was like having a meteor land in my kitchen. "Why?" I blurted out. "I don't understand. This is insane." "Because I require a husband," she stated. Her tone as flat as if she were reading a quarterly report. "A husband with a clean record, a simple background, who is reasonably presentable, and most importantly, who is controllable. You, Jack Carter, I've read your file. An orphan, no living parents, simple social circle. You meet the first 3 criteria. As for the last one," her eyes sharpened. "That text you sent me ensures you meet the last one." It hit me like a punch to the gut. The text, it was her leverage. If I refused, she could hang a sexual harassment charge over my head and destroy my life. A chill crawled up my spine. This woman was terrifying. This wasn't a negotiation. It was an ultimatum. "I need you to play a part to satisfy my family," she continued, giving me no room to argue. "During the term of our agreement, you will be compensated. A salary of $5 million a year. And this," she pulled a black, featureless credit card from her purse, "is for your daily expenses. The PIN is 888888. $5 million. I worked myself to the bone for a salary that barely scraped 6 figures. But this was hush money, soul money. And if I refuse?" I asked, my jaw tight. A tiny, cold smile touched the corner of her lips. It was the first time I'd ever seen her smile, and it was more terrifying than her scowl. "You could try. By tomorrow morning, a story about a senior designer at a prominent firm harassing a female executive will be on every industry blog, every forum, and probably the alumni page of your alma mater. Oh, wait, you're not a senior designer yet, are you?" She was threatening me, openly and without a hint of shame. I looked into her emotionless eyes and knew, with absolute certainty, that she would do it. My life, my career, my entire future was in her hands. Did I even have a choice? No. My shoulders slumped in defeat. "Okay," I heard myself say. "I'll do it." The words tasted like ash. I had to sign my life away. Good. She seemed satisfied with my compliance. She placed the card on the cluttered coffee table. "Now get changed. We're going somewhere." "Where?" "The courthouse." "And now?" I glanced out the window. It was already dark. "I've made a call. They're waiting for us." Her power was beyond anything I could have imagined. I walked like a zombie into my bedroom and pulled out the only decent suit I owned. As I dressed, I caught my reflection in the mirror, a man whose face was a canvas of humiliation and disbelief. Was my life really about to be controlled by this woman? Half an hour later, I was in the passenger seat of her Bentley, clutching my birth certificate, feeling like I was trapped in the world's most bizarre fever dream. Sure enough, a clerk was waiting for us at the deserted courthouse. Photos, forms, signatures, fingerprints. The whole process was unnervingly fast. Victoria remained impassive through it all, as if she were closing a business deal. When the 2 freshly printed marriage certificates were placed in our hands, I still felt like I was floating outside my own body. I, Jack Carter, 25 years old, was married to Victoria Sterling. Stepping outside, the cool night air did little to clear my head. Victoria checked her watch. Tomorrow night at 7. You will accompany me to my family's estate for dinner to meet my grandfather. Here is the address and a complete dossier on every family member. Memorize it. Don't screw it up. She handed me a tablet loaded with documents. From now on, you'll be living with me. My assistant will handle packing up your things tomorrow. Wait, I finally found my voice. Ms. Sterling. Victoria. This is a business arrangement. Do we have to live together? The name Victoria felt strange and foreign on my tongue. She turned to look at me, the streetlights casting long shadows across her face. Jack, do you think my grandfather is an easy man to fool? Her voice was laced with scorn. If we're going to do this, we do it right. You need to learn your role. You're my husband. The next day, like an unplugged appliance, I was packed up by Victoria's hyper-efficient assistant and delivered, along with my few boxes of belongings, to her penthouse apartment. The place was obscene. It occupied the entire top floor of a skyscraper, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a 360-degree view of the glittering city skyline. The decor was stark black, white, and gray, cold, expensive, and minimalist, just like Victoria herself. My life's possessions were deposited in a guest room that felt more like a storage closet in a palace. At 6 p.m., Victoria came home. She swapped her heels for slippers and her power suit for a silk lounge dress, a change that softened her corporate armor but did nothing to warm the frost on her face. Are you ready? She asked. I looked down at myself. I was wearing a custom-tailored suit her assistant had delivered, the price of which I was afraid to even guess. My hair had been professionally styled. I looked less like me and more like a rented mannequin. Yeah, I mumbled. Remember, once we're there, say as little as possible. Smile. I'll handle everything, she instructed before turning to leave. On the ride to the Sterling estate, I clutched the tablet displaying the complex web of her family tree, my palms sweating. Her grandfather, the patriarch, was a titan of industry. Her uncles were sharks, circling the corporate power structure. And there was a whole host of cousins and relatives, each with their own agenda. This wasn't dinner. This was walking into the lion's den. The car passed through a heavily guarded gate into a private community of sprawling mansions, stopping before a massive, brilliantly lit estate. A butler greeted us at the door. Ms. Sterling, welcome home. Your grandfather is waiting. Victoria nodded and, to my shock, looped her arm through mine. Her skin was cool and smooth, but the contact made my entire body go rigid. Relax, she whispered, her voice a low warning. You look like a hostage. I took a deep breath and forced a smile that felt more like a grimace. The inside of the house was opulent enough to make my eyes water. A long dining table was already crowded with people, and as we entered, a dozen pairs of eyes, critical, curious, and condescending, shot toward me. At the head of the table sat an older man, likely her grandfather. He was in his 70s, but radiated an aura of immense power. Grandfather, I'm home. Victoria's voice softened, a rare show of warmth. This is Jack Carter, my husband. The word husband dropped into the room like a bomb. A dead silence fell. Every eye was on me, pinning me in place like a bug under a microscope. Absurd. A middle-aged man slammed his hand on the table and shot to his feet. Victoria, marriage is not a game. Who is this boy? Victoria's expression hardened. Uncle, this is my decision, and it is not a game. Just then, a smug, oily voice cut through the tension. Victoria, darling, is this the boyfriend you've been hiding? I was expecting some captain of industry, but it appears he's just one of your employees. I looked toward the voice. A young man in a flashy pink suit was on his feet, a look of undisguised contempt on his handsome face. The tablet's dossier flashed in my mind. Landon Vance, heir to the Vance Corporation, the man her grandfather wanted her to marry, and her most persistent and most hated suitor. He was here. The main event of this little ambush had arrived. Landon sauntered over, swirling a glass of red wine, and looked me up and down like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. Landon Vance, he said, extending a hand with a fake smile. And you are? Where is it you work, Mr. Carter? I knew this was coming. The power play. Before I could answer, Victoria stepped in, her voice frigid. Landon, he is my husband. It is none of your business. Oh, but it is. Landon's smile widened. Victoria and I go way back. I have to make sure the man she chose is up to snuff. Don't be nervous, Mr. Carter. This is a simple question. What's your position at Sterling Industries? Director? Department head? He emphasized the word position, and a few snickers echoed from a table. My fists clenched at my sides. This was it. Sink or swim. I looked up, met his arrogant gaze, and let a small, easy smile spread across my face. You're too kind, Mr. Vance, but I'm no director. Landon's smirk grew wider. I paused for a beat before adding, casually, I just work for Ms. Sterling. I deliberately humbled myself, accepting the full force of his intended insult. Victoria's arm tensed around mine. She clearly hadn't expected me to play along. Landon burst out laughing, a loud, braying sound full of scorn. He just works for her. Victoria, did you hear that? You married one of your employees? Your taste has certainly become unpredictable. The atmosphere in the room was thick with embarrassment. Everyone was looking at us like we were the punchline to a bad joke. Just then, the old man at the head of the table, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried an authority that silenced the room instantly. Enough. The room went still. His hawk-like eyes settled on me. Boy, look at me. I lifted my chin and met his gaze directly. No fear, no hesitation. I was in too deep to play the coward now. If I was going to go down, I was going to go down swinging. Grandfather, I said. My voice was calm and steady. The single word sent a small tremor through Victoria's arm and wiped the smirk clean off Landon's face. Mr. Sterling's eyes widened slightly in surprise. He hadn't expected me to be so bold, to so quickly adopt the familial address under this much pressure. Your name is Jack Carter? The old man asked slowly. Yes, sir. And you work for? Your granddaughter's company. Doing what? I'm a designer. My answers were short and direct. Landon sneered from the side. Grandfather, do you hear this? A junior designer. Victoria must have lost her mind. Mr. Sterling ignored him, his eyes still locked on me. A designer? These days, any kid who knows how to use Photoshop calls himself a designer. His words were a clear challenge, laced with dismissal. This was the real test. I didn't argue. Instead, I smiled faintly. You're right, sir. Knowing the software is just the beginning. Real design isn't about making things look pretty. It's about solving problems, creating value. Oh, he leaned forward, a flicker of interest in his eyes. Go on, tell me how you solve problems. This was my chance. Before coming, I had devoured every piece of information on that tablet. Not just the family tree, but every recent project and challenge facing Sterling Industries. I took a breath, my thoughts racing. Let's take the Viridian City project your company is currently bidding on. I began, my voice clear and confident. I've seen the project brief. The main competitor is Vance Corporation. Their proposal focuses on a cold, futuristic aesthetic. It's visually impressive, but it misses the most important element: people. My statement made several of the family members around the table shift uncomfortably. This was a highly confidential project. How did an outsider like me know the details? I could feel Victoria's grip tighten on my arm, a silent warning. But I was already committed. A smart city isn't about how many touch screens you have. It's about whether the people living there feel comfortable, connected, and at home. I pressed on. The Vance proposal feels like a sterile, steel jungle. My idea is to integrate a sense of natural, human-scale community with modern technology. For example, instead of just putting up screens, we use holographic projectors to create interactive green spaces that change with the seasons. We turn the municipal recycling program into a city-wide competitive game with rewards for neighborhoods. We design a public lighting system that shifts its color temperature to mimic natural light cycles, proven to improve public health and mood. The words poured out of me. All the ambitious, forward-thinking ideas that had been shot down by my boss as impractical were now finding their voice. The dining room was utterly silent. Everyone, even the most skeptical uncles, was captivated by the vision I was painting. Landon's face was a mess of shifting colors. I was hitting every weak point in his own proposal, points he probably hadn't even considered. Mr. Sterling, who had been leaning back in his chair, was now sitting ramrod straight, his eyes shining with a sharp, analytical light. So, In conclusion, I finished. I believe the future isn't a collection of coal technologies. It's the return to human-centric values, amplified by technology. That is the core philosophy that will set the Sterling proposal apart and truly resonate with the city. I finished with a slight nod. Silence hung in the air for a long moment. Finally, Mr. Sterling spoke, his voice thick with an excitement he couldn't hide. Excellent. A return to human-centric values. Excellent. He slammed his hand on the table, not in anger, but in sheer appreciation. Victoria, this husband of yours. A good choice. A very good choice. The look in the old man's eyes had completely transformed. The dismissal was gone, replaced by a deep, appraising respect. Victoria was stunned. She stared at me, her cool composure completely shattered. For the first time, I saw something other than ice in her eyes, shock, disbelief, and a flicker of something else. Something I couldn't name. She had grabbed a random employee to be her shield and had unwittingly picked up a sword. Landon's face was a toxic shade of green. Grandfather, it's all just talk. Anyone can talk a big game, he protested weakly. You be quiet. Mister. Sterling snapped, his voice like a whip crack. If you had half his vision, the Vance proposal wouldn't be so damn superficial. Go sit down. Landon, publicly humiliated, shrank back to his seat, his face burning with rage. I, on the other hand, was feeling pretty good. I'd won this round, and I'd won it clean. The rest of the dinner was a completely different affair. The dismissive stares were replaced by looks of intrigue and curiosity. Mr. Sterling insisted I sit next to him, and we spent the next hour deep in conversation about urban planning, sustainable technology, and future design trends. All my crazy ideas, which had been collecting dust in a folder on my laptop, had finally found an audience. Victoria sat quietly, barely speaking, but I caught her watching me several times, her expression unreadable. Landon stewed in silence, looking like a thundercloud in a pink suit. When the evening finally ended, we said our goodbyes to a surprisingly warm Mr. Sterling and got back in the car. The silence in the Bentley was thick with unspoken thoughts. I could feel Victoria's eyes on me. Her gaze was no longer just cold. It was complicated. Those ideas tonight, she finally said, breaking the silence. Were they really yours? Who else's would they be? I leaned back against the leather seat, a bit drained from the mental gymnastics of the evening. You'd be surprised what you can come up with when you have a graveyard of rejected client proposals. My tone was slightly self-deprecating. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. The city lights slid across her face, painting her in shifting patterns of light and shadow. Why didn't you ever present these ideas at the company? She asked. A bitter smile touched my lips. Ms. Sterling, do you really think a rejected proposal from a junior designer would ever make it to your desk? It wouldn't even make it past my department head's inbox. My direct superior, Mark Henderson, was a classic corporate parasite, notorious for stealing credit and burying any idea that wasn't his own. Victoria fell silent again. As a top-down executive, she had likely never considered the stifling realities of the company's lower rungs. When we got back to the penthouse, she took a new pair of men's slippers from a closet by the door. These are yours, she said simply. I paused, then took them from her. They were simple, but the gesture felt strangely significant. Tonight, she began, her back to me as she stood in the entryway. Thank you. Her voice was so quiet I almost missed it. It was the first time I'd ever heard her say those words. Don't mention it, I said, slipping on the comfortable footwear. It was a mutually beneficial transaction. I helped you with your family. You're saving my career. We're even. It was the truth, but as I said it, it felt hollow. Victoria didn't reply, just walked in her master bedroom and closed the door. I stared at the closed door, a strange mix of emotions swirling inside me. This woman was far more complex than the simple Ice Queen persona she showed the world. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up. On the kitchen island was a sandwich and a glass of milk with a note tucked underneath. Her handwriting was like her, sharp, elegant, and efficient. Eat this. The black Audi in the garage is yours to use. Don't be late. I sat and ate the sandwich. It was nothing special, but it warmed me from the inside out. Driving the sleek, understated Audi A8 to the office, I felt like an imposter. The moment I walked into my department, I knew something was different. The way my colleagues looked at me, a mix of envy, awe, and blatant sycophancy. My best friend Dave grabbed me and pulled me into a corner, his face flushed with excitement. Dude, Carter, what the hell? When did you land the Ice Queen? The entire office is buzzing about you leaving with her in a Bentley last night. My skin prickled. It's not what it looks like. She just gave me a ride. A ride? My ass. Dave shot back, his expression saying, I don't believe you for a second. Spill it. Are you two a thing? Did you go back to her place? Before I could invent a plausible lie, my department head, Mark Henderson, waddled over, his face plastered with a greasy smile. Jack, there you are. Hope you had a restful evening. His tone was so sickeningly sweet it made my teeth ache. Just 2 days ago, he'd reamed me out for a minor font issue. Morning, Mark, I said coolly. Great, he said, rubbing his hands together. So, Jack, seeing as you and Ms. Sterling are so close, I was hoping you might put in a good word for the department. You know, about that Viridian City project? If we could get our team involved, there'd be a hefty bonus in it for you, of course. I laughed internally. The hypocrisy was astounding. Yesterday's trash was today's treasure. I was about to brush him off when an unwelcome visitor silenced the entire office. Landon Vance, dressed in another impeccably tailored, obnoxious suit, strode in with 2 assistants flanking him like bodyguards. His eyes scanned the room and locked onto me with venomous intensity. Jack Carter, he said, stopping in front of my desk and looking down his nose at me. My office. Now, he didn't have an office here. He meant the conference room. Chapter 6. I followed Landon into the empty glass-walled conference room. His 2 assistants stood guard outside the door. Name your price. Landon got straight to the point, tossing a checkbook and a gold-plated pen onto the table. Lee Victoria. Write any number you want. I looked at the checkbook and almost laughed. Do all rich guys think every problem can be solved by throwing money at it? Mr. Vance, do you really think what Victoria and I have can be bought? I deliberately used her first name, savoring the way it made him flinch. His face darkened, jealousy burning in his eyes. What you have, he sneered. You're a nobody, a glorified wage slave. Don't pretend this is about love. You're in it for her money and her status. Stop playing games. He pushed the checkbook towards me. I'll give you $5 million. Disappear from her life and from this city. That's more money than you'll see in a lifetime. $5 million. There was that number again. Victoria buys me for $5 million a year, and Landon wants to buy me off for a one-time payment of $5 million. Apparently, that was my going rate. I leaned back in my chair, crossed my legs, and gave him a lazy smile. You know, Landon, you've got it all wrong, I said conversationally. You assume I'm after her money. But did you ever consider the possibility that she's after me? You piece of trash. The insult hit its mark, and he slammed his hand on the table. What the hell do you have to offer? You have no family, no money, no class. Why would she ever want someone like you? And yet, she didn't choose you, did she? I countered, my voice calm. You've got the family money, the connections. You have everything I don't. But she chose me, took me home to meet her grandfather. Ever wonder why that is, Landon? Every word was a needle aimed directly at his inflated ego. His family and wealth were the sources of his pride, and they meant nothing to Victoria. He was shaking with rage, pointing a trembling finger at me. Oh, and one more thing, I added, as if I'd just remembered. Last night, Victoria told me how much she despises arrogant, entitled men just like you. Said spending another second in your presence made her skin crawl. Victoria had never said that, of course, but he didn't need to know that. The effect was instantaneous. Carter, you're dead. Landon completely lost it. He lunged across the table, his fist aimed squarely at my face. I was ready for it. I shifted to the side, and his punch sailed past my ear. His momentum carried him forward, and with a loud thump, his forehead connected squarely with the conference room's glass wall. His assistants heard the noise and burst in. Mr. Vance, are you all right? Landon staggered back, clutching his head, a bright red mark blooming on his forehead. He glared at me, his eyes murderous. You dodged me. I held up my hands in mock surrender. You lost your balance, man. Not my fault. And I'd think twice before throwing another punch. This whole place is wired with security cameras. His chest heaved, but my words seemed to penetrate his rage. Getting caught on camera assaulting Victoria Sterling's new husband in her own company building would be a PR nightmare. Fine, he hissed, spitting the words out. This isn't over, Carter. You just wait. I'm going to win the Viridian City contract. And when I do, we'll see how you explain that failure to Victoria and her grandfather. He stormed out, his assistants scrambling after him. I watched him go, the smile on my face turning cold. He wanted to beat me on the project. Game on. I went back to my desk, fired up my computer, and immediately started working, fleshing out the ideas I'd presented to Mr. Sterling, turning broad concepts into a concrete, revolutionary proposal. I was deep in the zone when an internal chat message popped up on my screen. It was from Victoria. My office. Now, that familiar, commanding tone. I sighed and headed for the top floor, to the corner office that was the company's seat of power. I pushed the door open to find her standing at the floor-to-ceiling window, her back to me. Ms. Sterling? You wanted to see me. She turned. In her hand was a small ice pack. Come here, she said, gesturing me forward. Confused, I walked over. She took my hand and gently pressed the ice pack against the back of it. I looked down and saw a red, scraped patch on my knuckles. I must have done it when I braced myself on the table to dodge Landon's punch. I hadn't even noticed. Did he hit you? Her voice was still cool, but it held. Something else. Concern, maybe? No, I shook my head. He hit the wall. Victoria didn't say anything, just focused on tending to the scrape, her touch surprisingly gentle. Her long eyelashes cast shadows on her cheeks. The office was so quiet I could hear my own heart beating, a heavy, frantic rhythm. I was so close I could smell the faint, clean scent of her perfume. My throat felt dry. Who was this woman? One moment, a ruthless corporate shark, the next. This. Chapter 7. The Viridian City Project, Victoria said, her eyes still on my hand. Do you want to run it? I froze. My heart gave a painful lurch. Yes, I said, without a second of hesitation. This was more than just a job. It was my chance to prove myself. Good. She put the ice pack down and handed me a file from her desk. This is an executive authorization letter. As of now, you're the project lead, reporting directly to me. You have access to all company resources. I took the file, my hand trembling slightly. Project lead, reporting directly to the CEO. This was an executive-level position. Yesterday, I was a nobody. Today, I was at the top of the food chain. But what about Mark Henderson? I asked. He was, after all, still the head of the design department. As of now, he reports to you, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. I'll send out a company-wide memo. Anyone who doesn't cooperate will be fired. I stared at her, stunned. This was real power. With a few words, she could reshape careers and lives. Why? I had to ask. Why are you giving me this much authority? Aren't you afraid I'll screw it up? Victoria finally looked up, her piercing eyes meeting mine. First, you made a very big promise to my grandfather. If this project fails, it's not just my reputation on the line, it's the Sterling family's. I can't afford to lose. She paused, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Second, I believe you can do it. What you said last night, that wasn't just talk. It was the first time she had ever directly praised me. A warmth spread through my chest. The feeling of being trusted was intoxicating. I won't let you down, I said, clutching the authorization file. It felt like a vow. See that you don't, she replied, the corner of her mouth twitching in what might have been the ghost of a smile. I walked out of her office feeling like a knight who had just been handed Excalibur, buzzing with energy and purpose. When I slapped the authorization letter down on Mark Henderson's desk, the series of expressions that crossed his face was a cinematic masterpiece, from shock to disbelief to terror, and finally, to the most pathetic, ass-kissing grin I had ever seen. Jack, Mr. Carter, sir, he stammered, practically bowing. Whatever you need, just say the word. I'm at your service. The rest of the department gathered around, their faces a mixture of awe and fear. The brutal reality of the corporate world was on full display. I ignored their fawning and immediately created a special project team, handpicking a few talented young designers who, like me, had been consistently overlooked and suppressed by the old guard. Mark Henderson was left with nothing to do but fetch coffee. I knew Landon was already mobilizing his own team. The war had just begun. For the next few weeks, my team and I lived and breathed the Viridian City project. We basically moved into the office. Victoria gave me her unconditional support. If I needed data, it was on my desk within the hour. If I needed a budget increase, it was approved without question. We worked around the clock, drawing, modeling, and running simulations, slowly transforming my grand vision into a tangible, actionable plan. And Victoria, she changed too. Every night, no matter how late I worked, she would wait up for me. The light in the living room was always on, and there was always a warm glass of milk on the coffee table. We didn't talk much, but her quiet presence filled the cold, cavernous apartment with a surprising warmth. Sometimes, when I was working late in the study, she would bring me a coffee and just sit on the sofa, reading a book in silence. One night, I was so exhausted I fell asleep right at my desk. In a hazy, half-conscious state, I felt a soft, light jacket carrying her faint, clean scent being draped over my shoulders. That night I dreamed, not of contracts or business deals, but of us walking hand in hand along a beach at sunset, like any other normal couple. The day we finished the proposal, the entire team was running on fumes but buzzing with pride. I took the final presentation, the culmination of all our work, and went straight to Victoria's office. She was in the middle of a video conference. When she saw me, she excused herself, muted her microphone, and waved me in. She took the heavy binder and began to read, her focus absolute. As she turned the pages, I could see a light growing in her eyes. When she reached the final page, a stunning, photorealistic rendering of our project, which I had named The Arbor, she froze. The image depicted a city where futuristic, streamlined architecture was interwoven with lush, vertical gardens and flowing water features. Children played in holographic forests, while elderly residents relaxed in smart, self-maintaining parks. Technology and humanity in perfect harmony. Jack! She looked up from the page, her voice trembling slightly. You're a genius. And for a second, my heart forgot how to beat. Chapter 8. The sharp ring of the phone shattered the quiet focus of the office. Victoria answered, and her face immediately turned to stone. What? The proposal was leaked. My own heart plummeted into my stomach. The proposal. The thing my team had bled for. Our secret weapon against Landon Vance. How could it have been leaked? Who? Victoria's voice was dangerously low. After a moment of listening, her gaze snapped to me, her eyes sharp as daggers. It wasn't me. I understood her silent accusation instantly. Send me everything now, she said, and hung up. The silence in the room was suffocating. Victoria, I said, my voice hoarse. It wasn't me. She didn't answer, just walked to her desk and opened her email. A new message was at the top. It had attachments. Photos. On her screen, I could see our top secret arbor proposal spread across Landon Vance's desk. Another photo was a security camera still from coffee shop. In it, one of my own team members, a quiet young programmer named Leo, was handing a USB drive to a man I didn't recognize. The timestamp was from yesterday afternoon. It was in my breathe. Leo was a good kid, quiet but talented. I never would have suspected. I know it wasn't you, Victoria said, her voice devoid of emotion. But that doesn't change the fact that Landon has our entire plan. The presentation is tomorrow. We don't have time to create a new one. A wave of utter despair washed over me. We had lost. Before we even stepped onto the battlefield, we'd been defeated. All that work, all those sleepless nights for nothing. I could practically see Landon's smug, triumphant face. I sank onto the sofa, the strength draining out of me. Victoria looked at my defeated posture, but she didn't offer sympathy or blame. She just walked over and handed me a glass of water. Drink this. I took it numbly. It's over, I muttered. It's all over. No, it's not. Victoria's voice was quiet but laced with steel. It's not over until the last vote is cast. I looked up at her. In her cool, clear eyes, a flame of defiance was burning. What was leaked, she said, her words slow and deliberate, was Plan A. My mind reeled. Plan A, that meant. Did you really think I would bet the entire future of this company on a single hand? A sly, cunning smile, a smile I had never seen before, played on her lips. From the very beginning, I had you develop two proposals. One was The Arbor, the public-facing plan. The other. She walked to a concealed safe behind a painting, entered a code, and pulled out a second, identical binder. Was Plan B, the one that only you, me, and God know about. She dropped the binder on the coffee table in front of me. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside were drawings and schematics I recognized immediately. It was a proposal far more radical, more audacious than the Arbor. It integrated concept from the metaverse, creating a hybrid city where the physical and digital worlds seamlessly merged. I had abandoned the idea early on, thinking it was too futuristic, too impossible to implement. I had no idea Victoria had secretly pushed me to complete it. All those times she had called me into her office for seemingly random reasons, asking me to tweak a few things on some side project. I realized now, all those scattered pieces, when put together, formed this. This was Plan B. I stared at her, speechless. This woman's mind, her foresight, was terrifying. She had anticipated the possibility of a traitor from day one. I've already had security detain Leo. Right now, Landon thinks he's holding a winning hand, Victoria said, her eyes turning hard and sharp. Tomorrow, I'm going to watch him fall. A surge of adrenaline shot through me, chasing away the despair. In its place was a fierce, burning desire to fight. All right, I said, jumping to my feet. Let's go give him a surprise he'll never forget. That night, the lights of the top floor burned until dawn. It was just the two of us, side by side, refining and perfecting Plan B. We worked so closely I could smell the clean scent of her hair, could see the slight furrow of her brow as she concentrated. Our hands brushed against each other more than once, and each time, she would pull back as if shocked, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. The iceberg could melt. She could get flustered. By the time the sun rose, we were ready. We looked at each other, exhaustion and triumph warring in our eyes. Let's go, she said, reaching out to straighten my tie, the gesture as natural as if she'd been doing it her whole life. Time for war. Chapter 9. The convention hall was buzzing. Reporters and camera crews lined the aisles. City officials and industry experts filled the judges' panel. When Victoria and I walked in, all eyes turned to us. Landon was already there, holding court in the front row, looking like a king on Coronation Day. He saw us and sauntered over, a magnanimous, pitying smile on his face. Victoria. Jack, so glad you could make it, he said, his voice just loud enough for those around us to hear. I heard your team had a little security issue last night. Such a shame. Still, it's the taking part that counts, right? His fake sympathy was nauseating. Victoria ignored him completely, walking past him as if he were invisible. I paused, leaned in close, and whispered, "Don't celebrate just yet, Landon. It's not over till it's over." His smile faltered for a second before he sneered. "Save it, Carter. I can't wait to see the look on your faces when you lose." The presentations began. As fate would have it, Vance Corporation was first. Landon took the stage himself, delivering a charismatic, passionate speech about his proposal. When the familiar renderings of the Arbor flashed onto the giant screen behind him, the room filled with appreciative murmurs. The judges looked impressed. The few sterling executives in the room who weren't in on our secret looked like they were about to be physically ill. To them, the battle was already lost. Landon shot me a triumphant glare from the stage. He paraded around, presenting my ideas, my concepts, as his own. I sat there, my face a blank mask, counting down in my head. 3, 2, 1. And that is why the Arbor is the only choice for the future of our city. Thank you. Landon took a bow to thunderous applause. He walked off the stage like a conquering hero, deliberately bumping my shoulder as he passed. Next up, Sterling Industries, the announcer called out. A wave of sympathetic and smug looks washed over us. As far as anyone was concerned, we were just going through the motions. Ready, Victoria murmured. I nodded, and we walked onto the stage together. I didn't say a word. I just plugged a USB drive into the podium. The main screen flickered to life. But it wasn't a design proposal. It was a video. It was the interrogation footage of Leo, the young programmer. He was sobbing, confessing every detail of how Landon had threatened and bribed him into stealing the company's data. The video ended with crystal clear security footage of Landon and Leo making the exchange in the coffee shop. The hall erupted. The judges looked furious. The city officials looked scandalized. Corporate espionage of this magnitude was a cardinal sin. Landon's face drained of all color. He pointed a shaking finger at us, stammering, That's a fake. It's slander. The police can determine that. Victoria's voice rang out, cold and clear. We've already filed a report. I'm sure they'll be in touch. Landon stumbled back, looking like he was about to collapse. And now, Victoria continued, turning back to the stunned audience, allow us to present Sterling Industries' real proposal for Viridian City. As she spoke, I clicked the mouse. A new image filled the screen. A title, sleek and futuristic, that made the whole room gasp. Plan B. Mirrors an entirely new concept, a vision of a city where the physical and digital worlds were one, a blueprint for a community built on the foundations of the metaverse, unfolded before their astonished eyes. The hall was dead silent. Everyone was completely floored by the sheer audacity and brilliance of the plan. It made the arbor look like a child's crayon drawing. I looked down at Landon. His face had gone from white to red to a sickly purple, and had finally settled on the gray pallor of absolute defeat. This was my gift to you, Landon, I thought. Enjoy it. Chapter 10. The contract for Viridian City is awarded by unanimous decision to Sterling Industries for their Mirror City proposal. When the head of the panel announced the final verdict, the hall exploded. We had won, and it wasn't just a win, it was a total annihilation. The Sterling team was ecstatic, hugging and high-fiving. Mark Henderson, my former boss, actually tried to hug me, tears of joy streaming down his face. I sidestepped him. Across the room, the Vance Corporation camp was silent and still. Landon was frozen in his chair, his eyes vacant, like his soul had left his body. The police arrived shortly after, and in front of everyone, escorted a catatonic Landon Vance and several of his top executives out of the hall. For corporate espionage and bid rigging, he was facing serious prison time. His reputation and his company's was in ruins. The war was over. At the victory party that night, I was the guest of honor. Mr. Sterling was there, beaming with pride. He clapped me on the shoulder, praised me in front of the entire company, and then stunned everyone by announcing he was gifting me 5% of his personal shares in Sterling Industries. In the span of a few weeks, I had gone from a broke designer to a multimillionaire. My colleagues flocked around me, glasses raised, calling me Mr. Carter with a reverence that was both amusing and pathetic. I smiled and nodded, but through the noise and congratulations, I felt a strange sense of emptiness. I slipped out onto a balcony for some fresh air. A moment later, Victoria joined me. She was wearing a stunning red dress, a stark contrast to her usual black and gray. In the soft glow of the city lights, she was breathtaking. Not used to the attention, she asked, a glass of champagne in her hand. A little, I admitted with a wry smile. Feels like a dream. It's not a dream, she said softly, her eyes on the distant horizon. You earned this. We stood in comfortable silence for a while. So, I finally ventured, my voice feeling tight. Our contract. According to our deal, my job was done. I had helped her deal with her family and had won the company's most important project. The next step was a quiet divorce, a fat bank account, and a new life far away from her. The thought sent a sharp, unexpected pang of pain through my chest. Victoria didn't answer right away. She took a sip of champagne, the night breeze toying with her hair. Jack, she said, turning to face me. Her eyes, luminous in the dark, were fixed on mine. Would you be willing to make this a permanent arrangement? My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? I mean, she began, a beautiful blush creeping up her neck, her voice laced with a vulnerability I had never heard before. Would you be willing to be my real husband? I was speechless. My mind went completely blank. Was she proposing to me? The Ice Queen was proposing to me? The guy she had essentially blackmailed into this sham marriage. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. This had to be a hallucination. The champagne must have been stronger than I thought. Seeing my hesitation, the light in her eyes dimmed. You don't want to, she asked, a note of disappointment in her voice. I understand. You have your own money and status now. You can have any woman you want. You don't have to be tied to. I do. The words burst out of me, louder than I intended. I grabbed her hand, pulled her into my arms, and held her tight. She was warm and soft, and in that moment, holding her felt like holding the entire world. "Yes, Victoria, 100 times yes," I said, my words tumbling out in a rush of pure, unadulterated joy. She was stiff in my arms for a second, then her own arms slowly wrapped around my waist, holding on tight. "No take-backs," she mumbled into my chest, her voice thick with emotion. "Never." We stood there on the balcony, wrapped in each other's arms, with the entire glittering city as our witness. Our story was just beginning. Our real story. Chapter 11. After that night, everything changed. We weren't a boss and an employee anymore, not a sham couple bound by contract. We were real. That piece of paper from the courthouse finally felt like it meant something. The iceberg didn't just melt, it evaporated. The old Victoria would come home and disappear into her study. The new Victoria made a point of leaving the office at a reasonable hour and even try to learn how to cook. Her first few attempts resulted in a smoke-filled kitchen and meals that were borderline inedible. But watching her, wearing an apron, face smudged with flour but determined, was the most endearing thing I had ever seen. Eventually, cooking became my job. Her job became distracting me while I did it. "Honey, stop. They're going to make me burn the garlic," I'd say as she wrapped her arms around my waist from behind. She'd rest her chin on my shoulder, her voice a soft purr. "I'm hungry. Dinner's almost ready." "I'm not talking about dinner," she'd whisper, her warm breath on my neck sending a shiver down my spine. My grip on the spatula would falter. Was this really the same woman who used to command boardrooms with an iron fist? She had transformed into an enchanting siren, and I was happily shipwrecked. She seemed to take a wicked delight in my flustered reactions. During meetings, her foot would find mine under the table. I'd have to deliver a quarterly report while trying to ignore the distracting trail her heel was tracing up my leg. Professionally, she was still the sharp, no-nonsense Miss Sterling. But in the brief moments we were alone, in an elevator or an empty hallway, she'd press me against the wall for a quick, searing kiss. Just marking my territory, she'd murmur, a triumphant glint in her eye. "You're mine." I was completely, utterly gone for her. This was the real Victoria, a woman who reserved her warmth and passion for one person alone. Mr. Sterling was thrilled, insisting we come to the estate for dinner every Sunday. He'd spend the whole time playing chess with me, leaving Victoria to pout on the sidelines. "Grandfather likes you more than me now," she'd grumble on the drive home. "Good," I'd say, taking her hand. "Then you'll just have to be all mine." That always earned me a satisfied smile. Chapter 12, the Mirror City project, was in full swing, and as the project lead, I was buried in work. Victoria had given me full autonomy, with one condition: no late nights at the office. I had to be home for dinner. One afternoon, I was at the construction site when I got a frantic call from Dave. "Jack, help me. I'm at the velvet rope." His voice was choked with panic. My gut clenched. I jumped in my car and sped over. I found him huddled in a dark corner booth, his face bruised and his shirt torn. A woman with garish makeup was sobbing next to him. "What happened?" I demanded. "It's a setup, man," he wailed. "I met her online. We have one drink." And suddenly she's saying she feels dizzy. Next thing I know, a bunch of her brothers show up, accuse me of drugging her, and demand 50 grand or they'll break my legs. I looked at the woman. She refused to meet my eyes. It was a classic Badger game. Just then, a group of beefy guys with neck tattoos surrounded our table. The one in the lead, a bleach blonde thug, casually tapped a baseball bat against his palm. Well, look who called for backup. You're gonna pay for your buddy's mistake." Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was Victoria. "Where are you?" Her voice was crisp. "The velvet rope. A little situation with Dave." "I'm on my way." She hung up. The thug laughed. "Calling for help? Go ahead. I'd love to see who you bring to this party." He didn't have to wait long. A commotion erupted at the entrance of the bar. A team of men in dark suits and earpieces parted the crowd like the Red Sea. And then Victoria walked in. The music faltered and died. Every head in the place turned. She moved through the bar like a queen surveying her domain, her presence so powerful it sucked the air out of the room. The thugs stared, their jaws hanging open. Victoria walked directly to me, her eyes taking in Dave's bruised face and the menacing circle of goons. Her brow furrowed. "They did this?" she asked me. "Yeah." She turned her icy gaze on the bleach blonde leader. "Which hand did you use?" Her voice was quiet, but it carried a chilling authority that made the air crackle. The thug, unnerved, took a step back. Who are you? This ain't your business. Victoria ignored him, simply nodding to the head of her security detail. The hand he used to hit my husband's friend. Break it. Yes, ma'am. The security chief moved with terrifying speed, grabbing the thug like he was a child. Hey, get off me. What are you doing? His panicked shouts were cut short by a sickening crack. A scream of pure agony tore through the bar. The other thugs, terrified, dropped to their knees, babbling apologies. Victoria paid them no mind. She turned to the sobbing woman, pulled a card from her purse, and placed it on the table. There's $100,000 on this. Get out of the city. Never come back. The woman snatched the card and scrambled away as if the hounds of hell were after her. The bar was silent enough to hear a pin drop. Dave just stared, his mouth agape, looking at my wife as if she were a goddess of vengeance. Victoria, her work done, took my hand. Let's go home. Her hand was a little cold. I squeezed it tight and followed her out, leaving a trail of awe and terror in our wake. Chapter 13. In the car. Victoria was silent, her jaw set as she stared out the window. I knew she was angry, not at me, but for me. She was angry I'd put myself in potential danger without telling her. I'm sorry, I said, taking her hand. She tried to pull away, but I held on. Sorry for what? She asked, finally looking at me. Her eyes were glistening. For not calling you first. For making you worry. I pulled her into my arms. I promise from now on, you'll be my first call. Always. She buried her face in my shoulder, her voice muffled. I'm not trying to control you. I was just so scared something would happen to you. I know. I whispered, holding her tight. I know. Back at the penthouse, the mood was still heavy. I tried everything to cheer her up. I told her my best jokes. I did a stupid dance. Nothing. Finally, I had an idea. I went into our walk-in closet and pulled out the one thing I'd kept from that very first insane night, the wedding dress. Look what I found, I said, holding it up. She stared at it, her eyes widening in surprise. You kept that? Of course I did. I spread the heavy satin out, the fabric glowing in the soft light. It's what started everything. I got down on one knee, holding the dress up to her like a knight presenting a banner. Victoria Sterling, I said, my voice thick with emotion. We may already have the certificate, but I still owe you a proper proposal. I still owe you a real wedding. Will you marry me? Again, tears welled in her eyes and streamed down her face. She didn't say anything, just collapsed into my arms, clinging to me and sobbing into my shoulder. She cried out all the fear and anxiety from the past few hours, all the pent-up emotion from our strange, tumultuous journey. I just held her, letting her wash it all away. In that moment, I knew there were no more secrets, no more deals, no more walls between us. It was just us, finally and forever. Chapter 14. Our real wedding took place a month later on a private island, with only our closest friends and family in attendance. Mr. Sterling was so happy he practically glowed. Dave, my best man, shook his head in disbelief. A single fat-fingered text, man. You really did win the lottery. I smiled. He had no idea. Victoria walked down the aisle in a dress I had designed for her myself. I called at the beginning. When we exchanged our vows, looking into each other's tear-filled eyes, I knew my life was complete. I, Jack Carter, take you, Victoria Sterling, to be my wife, to have and to hold for the rest of my life. I, Victoria Sterling, she choked out through happy tears, take you, Jack Carter. You are the best mistake I ever made. We kissed, and the world fell away. Sometime later, I saw a news brief online. Landon Vance had been sentenced to 10 years in prison. His company, crippled by the scandal, had been bought out by a competitor. His empire was gone. It was a strange, distant echo from a life that no longer felt like mine. I closed the laptop as Victoria sat down next to me on the sofa, offering me a slice of apple from the bowl in her lap. What were you looking at? She asked. Nothing important, just an old ghost. I took the apple from her fingers and leaned in to kiss her cheek. She blushed, a sight that still made my heart race. By the way, she said, a playful glint in her eye, there's a 2-week business trip to Europe next month to scout new architectural trends. Are you interested? Are we going together? I asked. Of course. Then that's not a business trip, I said, pulling her into my lap. That's a honeymoon. Her blush deepened, and I kissed her, long and slow. Chapter 15. A year later. Mirror City was a resounding success, a shining beacon of innovation that had transformed the city's skyline and its very soul. My name was carved next to Victoria's on the dedication plaque. Life was good. Life was perfect. She was still a powerhouse CEO to the world, but at home, she was just my Victoria. For our first real anniversary, I filled the penthouse with roses and cooked her favorite meal. When she came home, her gasp of delight was the only sound in the candlelit room. "Do you like it?" I asked, wrapping my arms around her from behind. "I love it," she whispered. "There's one more surprise." I led her to the living room and turned on the projector. A video started to play. It began with a picture of my messy old apartment, followed by the awkward photo of us outside the courthouse, holding our marriage certificates. Then came images of us, working late in the office or tending to my hand, standing side by side on the stage of the presentation, our kiss at the wedding on the beach. A montage of our impossible love story. The video ended on a photo of us from that night, just moments before, wrapped in each other's arms, with a single line of text appearing on the screen. Best wrong number ever. Victoria was crying, her face buried in my chest. She tilted her head up and kissed me, a kiss filled with all the love and history we had built together. "Jack," she whispered against my lips, her voice thick with emotion. "I love you. I love you too, Victoria." Outside, the city lights sparkled like a carpet of fallen stars. But inside, right here in my arms, was my entire universe. It all started with a mistake, a text sent to the wrong person. But as it turned out, it was the best reply I could have ever hoped for. And